Joining us right now for his customary Monday morning visit is Congressman Randy Neugebauer. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
Good morning, guys. How are y'all?
Doing fine this morning, Congressman.
Doing good. So, still in Washington this week, Congressman?
I am, and, we've got a busy week. This is kind of the busy season here in Washington. A lot of our appropriation bills are moving across the House floor, authorizing committees, reauthorizing different programs. So I think a couple of issues that this week we may see a vote on the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal 2016. That really kind of sets up what our national defense is going to be. And then the House is also expected to possibly vote on what's called the USA Freedom Act, which basically is how we, it's a reauthorization of what has been known as the Patriot Act. So those are two big pieces of legislation that are likely to see action this week.
Speaking of those pieces of legislation, starting with the Patriot Act first, are you in favor of a renewal of that?
Well, I have supported that in the past. I think one of the things that we keep doing, and I think it's an important part of doing, is we keep refining and making sure that we're doing the job we need to do to collect intelligence in a very dangerous world, but at the same time of protecting, individual Americans' liberties and freedoms. And I've had a little bit of a preview of some of the new provisions in this current reauthorization that I think will even tighten those. So obviously need to see the final wording in the bill, but I'm lean to support that. And here's the reason why, is that what we know is that it's a very dangerous world out there, and that our intelligence is one of our most important ways we defend America against the enemies that are out there today. For example, ISIS. We know that ISIS is actually, operating here in the United States of America in one form or fashion or the other. We saw the Garland, Texas event that happened. That was an ISIS-motivated terrorist attack. So it's important that we have good intelligence, but we have to balance that with making sure that we take care of Americans' individual liberties and freedoms as well.
And then the second piece of legislation that you had mentioned being defense authorization spending, in that proposed bill, is there full funding for Dice Air Force Base and the B-1 bomber program there?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen about the defense bill is we actually plussed up the funding a little bit for the Department of Defense. One, we had the sequester, we had some new limitations put, but I think this is both the authorization and the appropriation bill, I think, fund the military at levels that are appropriate, and certainly the B-1 and the C-130s at Dice Air Force Base are an important part of that.
Right now, Kay, did you have something, Ken?
Well, Congressman, you're talking about that on the defense bill, and that kind of leads into a question I was going to ask. Governor Abbott ordered the State Guard, a branch of the Texas State military, to monitor the Jade Helm program that's going on in Texas. He said it was important that Texans know their safety, constitutional rights, private property rights, and civil liberties will not be infringed. What are your thoughts on the Jade Helm exercises that are going on in the western part of this country?
Yeah, well, this is something that's been going on for a number of years, since I think the first training exercises like this were in 1974. And basically this just makes sure that we train our troops to operate in a lot of different environments. And particularly, I think if you look at what we're operating now, we're operating in and around the world in some more urban environments. And so this is just another way, particularly our special operation forces that, we call on a number of occasions to do a lot of different diverse things. This is just a way to train them. And I'm very clear that this is not a threat to Texas. These men and women take the same oath of offices that I do, and that is to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States. And I've been around the Special Forces folks, and there's probably not anybody more dedicated than those folks to preserving American freedoms and liberties.
Because of the concern for Jade Helm, will there be any additional congressional oversight over this exercise or any additional safeguards put in place with the Joint Chiefs for this exercise?
Yeah, well, I talked to Mac Thornberry the other day, and I think certainly in their oversight of the overall services, that's one of the areas that, since it has brought up a number of questions, I wouldn't be surprised to see, either some classified or unclassified hearings just to, get a better feel of what the scope of those operations are and what they're trying to accomplish.
770-5790. If you have a question for Congressman Randy Neugebauer, 48 degrees in Lubbock. We'll go ahead and take a quick break and be back with Congressman Neugebauer after this. 7:49. Lubbock's First News continuing on this Monday morning. Rob Snyder, Ken Corbin filling in for Tom Collins and Laura Mack, and we're continuing our weekly discussion with Congressman Randy Neugebauer. And Congressman, this morning the National Review had a story on China and Russia continuing positive relations with each other, specifically China lending about $25 billion to Russian companies. I guess, what are your thoughts on China and Russians' relations and how it affects the U.S.?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that we've seen a major increase in globalization in the last 10 20 years. And certainly, that's one of the reasons that it's important that, for example, that we begin to get more aggressive with some of our trade agreements. What we've seen is the Chinese have really been very aggressive, going literally around the world, entering into trade agreements with countries individually, bilaterally. And we seem to be kind of stuck in this mode of, not being very aggressive in that way. And one of the things we saw the other day is we were running a huge trade deficit. And so, China understands the benefits to their country to trade, and certainly Russia their economy is in really not very good shape. And so my guess is the Chinese see an opportunity to invest in Russian businesses at this point in time.
Well, Congressman, that leads into my next question. This is Ken Corbin. The Chinese central bank lowered its interest rates recently. What impact do you think this will have on the U.S. economy, and do you think the U.S. Federal Reserve will change its rates anytime soon?
Well, that's the question that everybody's trying to figure out, Ken, because they keep looking at these employment numbers, and, you've got the dual mandate, one, to keep inflation in check, and then the Fed, for job creation. And the job numbers keep gyrating. One month they're good, one month they're bad. But I think overall the economy is getting better, but this has been a relatively slow recovery. So the Fed keeps kind of hedging itself. They can't lower their rates anymore. And so obviously the Chinese lowering their rates. I think one of the things that a lot of folks have concern about China is the fact that, the debt levels in those countries, and that some of the Chinese banks have very loose lending practices, and some of those loans may be in question. And so I think you see China trying to kind of prop up their economy a little bit.
If you have a question for Congressman Neugebauer, we'll try to slip it in right quick after we get a check of weather and the Pratt on Texas morning update, and we'll continue with Congressman Neugebauer in just a moment. 7:56, Lubbock's First News, News Talk 790 KFYO, KFYO.com. I'm Rob Snyder along with Ken Corbin filling in today for Tom Collins and Laura Mack. Congressman Randy Neugebauer joins us right now as we are wrapping up his weekly visit. And Congressman Neugebauer, on Friday, West Texas Intermediate crude closed at $59.50. 6 months ago, it was between $75 to $80. Do you think the rising oil prices could actually have a negative effect on the U.S. economy later this year?
Well, I think what we've been trying to see is oil's trying to find out, what the price of oil should be. And what we know is that the demand for oil is still outstripping supply. What we saw was a little bit of a buildup, and primarily that buildup has been from the innovation and technology of American oil companies being able to produce more oil domestically. But, obviously, when the oil prices go down, it helps part of our economy. When it goes up, it helps another at the expense of the other. But I think the economy had already adapted somewhat to higher oil prices prior to these prices going down. And so obviously could have some impact. But, again, we need to let these markets determine what oil is actually worth.
Have you been concerned at all with some of the Baker Hughes rig numbers? Because I know those have been pretty flat lately when they come out each week.
They are, and I think we already are beginning to see some repercussions from these lower oil prices, particularly in the service industry. A lot of the producers have the ability to hedge their oil, and so a lot of them are not actually selling oil at $59. They have that oil hedged at a higher price. But the service companies that service the industry, and as those rigs come down and are stacked in the lots, that begins to impact employment. I'm hearing employment a little bit softer in Middle and Odessa area than it's been in the past. So obviously these lower prices have had consequences.
Just about 1 minute left in our final segment, Congressman Neugebauer. Anything else that you'd like to mention this week that's either on your agenda or any upcoming public meetings?
Well, here's a trivia question. You know what happened 45 years ago on this day?
Well, the Lubbock tornado.
Exactly. And, I was just thinking this morning when I was listening, I think you said the temperatures there in Lubbock are in the 40s, and I remember that day very well. My apartment complex was hit by the tornado, but it was a very hot and still day in Lubbock, Texas, 45 years ago on May 11th.
Well, I remember it being very humid and very clear up to the time that sunset happened myself.
Yeah, I had just taken a final, and a couple of buddies of mine and I had gone out to get some dinner, and we came back to their apartment at 22nd Street, just off of University, and I was about to go home to my apartment on 5th Street, in the 2100 block, and it started raining really hard, and so I said, they said just wait the storm out here, and, kind of glad I did.
Congressman Neugebauer, thanks again for joining us today. Great talking to you, and we hope you have a great week.
You do the same.
Thank you, Congressman.